Hello, 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 everyone. Thank you for your patience and thank you for working with us and joining us and watching this live. And for those of you that will be watching this in the future, thank you for supporting Wearable Tech Ventures and Tech Remixed. I come to you as the founder of Wearable Tech Ventures. And even though we're going to be discussing design thinking in this sprint workshop, I'd like to start by first, again, thanking our sponsors, all of our partners, all of our participants and volunteers, because all of you just took a chance to believe in what we could do, how we can proactively change the world in a positive way by developing and promoting wearable technology with purpose, and doing so with underrepresented founders and by working together. We have accomplished a feat such as embracing this hackathon, this virtual hackathon, which we have over 200 registered participants, and that qualified us to be the world's largest virtual wearable tech hackathon. So I thank you for that. During this process, our participants have been introduced to various tracks that they could hack. And ultimately what that means is where they could come together and come up with creative solutions for a challenge associated with one of those tracks, associated with an industry or a particular problem. This particular workshop that I'm going to share is something that really does take time. And when I say that, it takes time because many corporations spend months and years working on this particular process. And we're only going to do an introduction to assist those that are participating to understand how they should be approaching or reapproaching their specific track as they prepare to present. You may have seen on our YouTube channel that we've had some other instances where we've featured our media partner, the Baltimore Times, and other affiliated partners, as well as other tech founders that may not be wearable tech affiliated. The reason for this is because the Baltimore Times, when we had a discussion about preparing for Tech Remix, they embraced the innovative mindset, and I challenged them to discover what media, and Black media in particular, would look like in the future and how they could contribute to that, considering their historic legacy. So with them, you kind of see design thinking in the process as we're going through this. So we have a number of different things going on throughout this particular week, but it is all with purpose. So before I share my presentation, I do want to provide an announcement for all of our participants as well as our volunteers. You should have received something via email, as well as announcements and updates from all of our volunteers and in the message boards and announcement section of Discord. Today, Wednesday, as well as tomorrow on Thursday, you have the opportunity to win prizes. And so we know that there's a lot of information. It's like drinking from a fire hose. And we have many people that this is their first time participating in this type of experience. And we curated it with a lot of our first timers and with our specific demographic, the underrepresented population in mind. So we know that there's a lot of opportunity to learn, but we also want to reward you along the way. So we ask that you comply with the requests so that you can be entered for some of those prizes as we go through the week. All right, so are you ready? So I'm going to share my screen. And excuse me while I cough because we're human around here. And so I come to you not only as a tech founder, but I don't know if many of you know, I used to be a business professor as well. So I was a business professor for undergraduate and graduate students. I also started my career, well, I should say most of my career, if not all of my career, has been affiliated in the STEM world in some way. And I spent the vast majority of the beginning of it in business development. So I had the opportunity to work in a role where I was the first Black woman to be a national account manager for one of the subsidiaries of Cargill. And Cargill at the time was the largest privately owned company in the world. I've also worked in corporate America, in the chemical realm, STEM realm, pharmaceuticals. And then I've led some design thinking efforts with some of the top scientists and top physicians around the world. So I did some of that work in capacity where I was working with the federal government in a number of different roles. And I'm honored to serve as the director of innovation for a very prominent forward-thinking small company in Baltimore. So in addition to what I do, as the founder and leading the vision for Wearable Tech Ventures. So what I'm saying is, I know what I'm talking about when it comes to design thinking. You can read about all of my credentials on my website and degrees and all that other stuff. But actually, even though I had been doing design thinking work for some time, for quite a few years, I became credentialized, if you will, from MIT. And so that's how I'm coming to you today. And I think that this concept of design thinking is fairly new to a number of people. Some people may have heard of it. They don't really know how to use it or how to incorporate it. And I've had the opportunity to work with some of our corporate partners prior to Tech Remix to prepare them and actually curate what we call some innovation tournaments. And in the future, we'll be doing a lot more design thinking workshops. It's important. It's important, not only for startups, for founders, but any type of business that wants to make sure that they're growing. And I believe everyone here can benefit from that. So again, this is going to be a sprint-like workshop to give you an understanding of how you should be approaching opportunities. And I say opportunities. Some people might say problems, but I think there's opportunities there. So to provide examples of opportunities that where you can adjust your approach, and then also provide some examples. And one thing about me is that I'm not going to be totally traditional. I'm going to provide some basis of traditional means and examples, but I'm also going to shift your thinking and think out of the box with some of the examples that I provide here today as well. Ultimately, you will receive the basic information that you need in order to pivot and I'm talking specifically to our participants during Tech Remix, if you need to pivot with your idea. But then also I'm talking to a number of product development managers, talking to business managers and other partners, media, et cetera, that may be thinking, how can they redefine themselves or how can they make waves, especially when we're in this midst of this economic tsunami, if we can call it that, as it relates to a number of events we've experienced over the past few years and what may be happening in the near future. So I'll go ahead and get started here. So what is design thinking? Ultimately, design thinking is an opportunity to approach a problem set, to approach a way of doing business in a creative way. And so basically it helps you to, number one, understand your customer. It also helps you to challenge assumptions, the ways that we think, redefine problems, and then ultimately develop innovative solutions that can result in a prototype, that can result in a pivot and or test, and then ultimately something that is proven and viable. So if I were with you in person and if I had a whiteboard, ultimately I would be writing down, you empathize. You have to empathize with your customers. And this is an area, this first step or this first area associated with design thinking is something that, people hear, we think we know, we understand to a degree what it means to be empathetic. However, many companies, many startups, many people, many leaders miss the mark in this particular area. Let me give you an example. Have you ever thought of something and was like, oh, that would be a great idea? And you think how much money it can make. And then you start to think about how you can get it done and how you can get it produced. But did you ever stop to think, what do my customers need? Would they want this? Why would they want this? How could they use it? Oftentimes that latter thinking never is approached, or it happens too late. Too often, many new innovations are begun because of greed or because of other realms. But it's not common for product managers or those within that product development or solution area to pause and give themselves time to really consider the customer needs. Now, other steps in the process include defining your product and solution, ideating, prototyping, and testing, okay? And so, again, when looking at this, it's a process and it isn't necessarily linear. What happens in this particular process is that there may be times where you have to go back to the beginning. You may think that you have some ideas, you may have done some customer interviews, and then as you move through the process to define or ideate the problem and develop a prototype, it may not work, so you have to start from the beginning. I share this because when you are engaging in a design thinking process, especially in real life, it's important for any management team, for any forward thinkers to provide time, be patient. And that's interesting. It's an oxymoron because we're in a life cycle where our attention spans are incredibly short. We're able to get things incredibly fast to our mobile devices, as well as through other portals where we can receive information. So the approach to this process is very important. Now, some of you that are participating in Tech Remix may say, we don't have time to approach this. So I'm going to give you some tips so that you can speed it up for the purpose of Tech Remix, but ultimately for those companies that I've worked with in the past, as well as other institutions, they understand the importance of that empathizing. And once you get that empathizing piece correct, then the more efficient your process will be as you continue to move forward. So mindset is key. And for those that I work with on a day-to-day basis, they know that I'm always harping on mindset. It's incredibly important, especially as an innovator. Heck, I won Innovator of the Year, I should know. So mindset is key, and especially because there are so many new technologies, the way that we are approaching life is changing on a daily basis. When we have a new mindset, we'll get new results. And ultimately, for any business, if you want to stay in business, you have to have results. And you especially need to have new results. So the important thing is to keep the customer's needs in focus. And so that requires a different approach. Now, I can give you an example. Because I came from an industry that was very numbers driven, and there was a short time frame to achieve those particular numbers, and where the representatives in that particular business really made a really good living, right? So oftentimes there was a response or a reactionary type of living to meet a particular sales goal versus really understanding or developing products in a way that focused in on the customer specific needs. So I'm sharing this with you because as you are looking at these 5 tracks, as you are thinking how to reach your customers, the question I have for you is, how much time have you actually spent with your customer? How much time did you spend talking to the customer? And so there's so many different ways that you can do this. If you have invested no time in speaking to your customer, your prospective customer, understanding the way that they think about things, don't move forward. You know, as we say in Monopoly, do not pass go. So I encourage everyone, and this is even from research, et cetera. We know in wearable technology, There were so many errors made early on because there was so much research done and it didn't involve the populations that would be impacted or affected. It was very singular in the approach. So this design thinking process covers many different industries and it is useful for everyone on a day-to-day process. So keep your customer, prospective customers' needs in mind. Now, some of you might be saying, my customer doesn't know what they need. I have to develop it for them so that they would know. And that's something that the early Steve Jobs was saying. In his particular case with that first product, he was right. But later on, as he started to develop more products and be involved in business, he realized it's important to talk to the customer. So that's the number one thing. So since I mentioned Steve Jobs, let's discuss Apple. I'm an Apple fan from a day-to-day basis. But when we think about design thinking, why has Apple been so successful? Are they the only technology company? Were they the first to develop a cell phone? The difference with Apple is that they created ways that the customer could use their products easily. They created ways that their customer can integrate their products in various aspects of their lives on a daily basis and never have to switch brands. How did they get to this point? Customer feedback, talking to the customer. Had Apple not spent time talking to their customers and understanding the various segments and understanding what's important to them, we never would have seen all the ways that Apple has innovated from not only a hardware or hard product perspective, but even software. How many of you have ever lost your phone or lost your Apple device? Or how many of you have ever had one device, if you're a multi-Apple user, I should say, how many of you have ever had one Apple device shut down, but you were able to access your files and your network through another Apple device? Didn't that make life easy? That's what they thought about. So that particular process of understanding their customer, understanding that their customer didn't always know what they wanted, but they had a specific need, make my life easy. If something gets lost, or if I need to integrate something, make it easy for me to get my work done. That's what Apple did. Let me give you another example. Airbnb. So Airbnb has been one of these models that a lot of business schools study. It's also been a model that a lot of startups study, especially from their early pitch decks, which are online. But what did Airbnb do? Well, basically, you have these guys that started this model, and there's a story about cereal boxes and how they were just bringing air mattresses into a place to determine and to test, hey, what's it like, to rent out a particular space, or, if people are coming into town and make it cheap. So they started off small and simple, and then now it's grown to the point where everybody has heard of Airbnb. Maybe they've at least used the Airbnb one time, but there's also many people that now serve as hosts of Airbnb. So basically, the founders were looking at how can we make sure that you can travel and travel safely, but at a cheap rate, and still, achieve your travel goals and not have to worry about some of the chain hotels or whatnot. And as a result, other needs were uncovered as they have developed the platform from a host perspective as well as other discoveries perspective. But this only could have come about had they, one, understood their customer, talked to their customer, and then understand the problem, and then develop a solution, and then reiterate or ideate around that problem and develop prototype and then fix it. There are so many people that love Airbnb because of that reason. So when you think about the customer's needs in particular, and you can fulfill that, then you might also uncover some additional wants. And hopefully you can fulfill those too. But if you can definitely fulfill that need, you're a winner. Now let's talk about 50 Cent. Who would have thought I would have brought him up in this situation? But do you know the story about him and vitamin water? I encourage you to read his book. I actually read it during the pandemic and listened to it on Audible. But one of the good things about 50 Cent is that when he was in music and he came across the gentleman that was, with vitamin water. And at the time, vitamin water was not what it was by the time it was sold and 50 Cent had gotten involved. But in the early stages, they wanted to grow. And 50 Cent was basically saying, if you want to grow and if you want to tap into a new market, here's what you need to do. You're going to need to adapt the flavoring, and then I can help you grow it for this particular customer segment because they like this flavor. And hey, they like water. It'll help them drink more water. Do you know what that flavoring was? When you think about the demographic that 50 Cent was catering to, he realized that if you go into some urban neighborhoods, they like grape. So that actually shifted this company where he came in, understood the customer's needs and also their wants. And as a part owner, was able to sell this. And he netted a couple hundred or 150 million. But it was a success story that he helped to leverage into other areas of TV where he helped to fulfill customer needs with certain content that they wanted to see on TV. I'm also going to bring this up, Wrap Snacks. And thank you to the Wrap Snacks Foundation for being one of our promotional partners when we started Tech Remix. Wrap Snacks, many of you might think of Master P, but also James Lindsay was one of the masterminds, and he leads Wrap Snacks and works with Master P. And what I like about these gentlemen, not only have they been entrepreneurs and been successful entrepreneurs who have innovated not only the music industry, but they're doing so in the food industry. And what they said was, yes, they're snacks, but there's no snacks that really represent certain flavors that certain people in certain neighborhoods want. Oh, and by the way, when we talk about flavor, a flavor for their life or flavor of what they like to listen to, the things that they embody on a daily basis. And then Wrap Snacks were born. And not only from the perspective of chips, but then they said, let's take it further. Let's take it to Wrap Snacks, the noodles. And then they created flavors and put icons on them. And I love watching this company. I've watched them for quite some time. And what I love about them is that ultimately what they're doing is identifying on a specific customer market and identifying the needs of that particular customer and understanding what it is that they like, but then understanding what's missing. And the reason they were able to capture what was missing, especially with some of their special flavors, is because a lot of the other companies that have been around for quite some time that are notable names, they never took the opportunity to ask customers in those particular demographics, were they really satisfied or did they want something else? So it's really important using those particular examples that you're creative, that you give yourself the opportunity to think outside the box, but then also to make sure that you have your particular customer in mind and that you take that feedback and determine how you can help them solve the particular need or problem that they currently have. Let me give you another example. Many of you have machines in your home that helps to make your morning beverage or your hot beverage, whether that's a coffee, a tea, or whatnot. And that came about because some of you said, I want to make my beverage, but I don't want to use the old way, or I don't like, having to handle coffee grinds and then pour them into something else. I want something that's just really easy so I can have it on the go. Or perhaps they also heard from some customers, I'm tired of spending so much money every day, and I need something with that same quality that I can get at home. And so now we know there are a lot of these machines that are in our homes. And I actually picked up a couple during the pandemic to turn my home into my own little coffee house. But it fulfilled a specific need. And some of those coffee machines have even iterated to the point where they said, you know what, how can we be sustainable? How can we help the environment? Can we use that as a marketing tool and do it well? Because we know that with a certain segment of our customers, they care about the earth. And I think this is important, especially for some of our tracks that are focusing on sustainability. Some of these machine manufacturers began that process and began some programs as it relates to a lot of the pods and things that were used in these particular machines. And they thought they were doing a good thing. However, as they continued to iterate and test these hypotheses, they came to a notion of this is great. It's a great marketing slogan, great marketing tool, but we're actually losing money. We're not as efficient or as effective as we would like. So I share that because even though you may think you have the perfect solution for your customer, it's important to think creative, but then also make sure that you're following business mindsets and making sure that it makes some sense. So as you are fulfilling your need, it's important that you focus on need versus greed. What we've seen in the past, and quite too often, in my opinion, especially when it comes to tech startups, are those that develop a product or develop this idea basically on a napkin. And far too many founders that have gotten so much investment money and have wasted it. They were chasing greed versus really looking at a need. Let me give you an example. I was at a conference in Northern California, and I'll never forget. I think I put it in my stories, or I didn't tweet because I wasn't on Twitter, but I shared the story because I just couldn't believe this guy was on stage and he talked about how many millions he had wasted on a couple other startups before he became successful. What I know from our targeted demographic, a lot of times we don't have that opportunity to even waste $1. A lot of times we don't even get the opportunity to meet someone to even make a pitch. So it's incredibly important that you incorporate design thinking so that when that opportunity comes your way, you know how to address the customer needs and also how to make sure it makes money. So it's not a focus on greed, it's a focus on need. And that's one of the things why we say at Wearable Tech Ventures, although we're developing and promoting wearable technology, the key is developing with purpose. Far too many startups in the past, and those that have wasted millions of dollars, maybe even billions of dollars, did so because they did not have the customer in mind. So we need a change. We need a change. And so I encourage you, as you move through this process, and especially as you move forward, again, design thinking is not something that you're just going to totally learn and master in one day. But if anything I can harp on for today is adjust the way that you approach the process and think from what your customer needs, and then talk to them and test a couple of things out. And what you can do in this sprint-like environment is read customer reports. We work with consulting partners. They have partners. They have reports, I should say, that indicate feedback from various industries on what it is that they've experienced and what it is that they're choosing to see for the future or seeking to see for the future. So in a sprint-like environment, you have to get creative with the way that you approach that. And yes, it's great to actually talk to a real person, but if you have to pivot, be creative, use some of those reports that some of our corporate partners issue. And also understand this, there could be a lot of different customers. As you are preparing your pitch, please do not say that everybody is your customer. You're going to have a primary customer, and then there are some subsequent customers as well. So it's important to understand how you can meet the primary needs of your target customer. And it's okay to identify some other customers, but please do not say everyone is your customer, because they're not. And again, getting to this, at the end of the day, it's great to develop a product. It's great if you can satisfy some needs, but you also need to understand, does it make dollars and does it make sense? At the end of the day, you are building a business. Let me say that again. You are building a business. Does it make dollars and does it make sense? So it's important to understand, how much is it going to cost for you to even develop and to make this, and what's that timeline or the approximate timeline? Does it make sense to make that investment? These are things that many of our investors and our corporate partners are thinking about as they are listening to your pitch. So again, your mindset and the way that you approach this is incredibly important. And I can tell you, it is night and day when looking at pitches from founders that approach this from a design thinking perspective versus those that do not approach it. I did not say at the very beginning of my presentation that I often coach a lot of founders, and not only here, just in Baltimore, Maryland, but I've coached founders and executive leaders around the country, and I work with founders around the world. And so for all of my founders in the ecosystem, to anyone that is listening or participating in Tech Remixed, do yourself a favor. Do your future investors a favor. Do your team a favor from a professional development perspective. Adjust your mindset. You can contact me for design thinking workshops or for innovation tournaments. Again, you can take a look at some of our corporate partners, and you will know that many of them have worked with me on design thinking in the form of innovation tournaments, et cetera. So I also invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn. And ultimately, you can contact me at lakeishagreenway.com. You can look at the full offering of services that I have there, as well as some books that are coming out. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you. Being a leader of a global wearable tech ecosystem is something that I did not necessarily start out, or I didn't want to do. I didn't wake up one day and say, I want to be a leader of a global ecosystem. If you read the articles that our media partners and our sponsors have written in preparation for Tech Remix, as well as if you follow my journey and read the articles from when I started in 2015 up until this point, you will understand I didn't start off with the intention of this. I had a particular customer in mind that I wanted to satisfy and to reinvent them to the world and help them show their genius. And as a result, wearable technology has been an amazing tool to do that. But it also is providing some benefits overall to the tech industry, the investment industry, et cetera. So I thank all of my advisors, my friends, all of you for participating, and all of our volunteers for taking this journey with me and for helping us to make history. Because ultimately, what started off as something truly small is impacting the tech industry as a whole. And we're making a big, big mark. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to wish you well. For our participants, please make sure you're staying tuned to all of the announcements that are in our platform. And I look forward to you being a tremendous success. Thank you for supporting Wearable Tech Ventures. And if you want to make a donation, you can do so on our website, wearabletechventures.org. Thanks. Bye.